Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to today's episode. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Daria, and we're going to talk about all kinds of incredible topics, all to do with science, perhaps astrobiology, planetary sciences, and all that amazing stuff that I love to talk about. So, welcome in, Daria. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to chatting with you. It's always good to talk about this stuff, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I love doing this stuff. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what you study and what you did.
Sure. So I'll start with where I am now and then kind of work backwards. I'm 27 years old and I'm a fourth year PhD student at the University of California, Riverside. I'm currently living in Los Angeles, California, and I've been out here since 2020. I actually grew up on the other side of the country, and that's where I spent most of my life. My mother and I immigrated from Ukraine when I was 2 years old, and then from that point on, we lived in Maryland until I graduated from undergrad. So I lived on the eastern shore of Maryland in a tiny town called Salisbury that most people haven't heard of. And I grew up there and ended up going to college doing my undergrad at Salisbury University. It was there that I got a bachelor's degree in biology and my minor was in chemistry. We didn't have any astronomy or planetary science programs, and it wasn't until the end of my junior year that I really kind of learned that astrobiology was a thing and it was something that I could be a part of. So when I was a junior in college, I was picking classes for the next school year, and there was this class for the first time ever being taught called astrobiology. I ended up taking it. I started doing research with my professor, and that was what snowballed me into getting a job at NASA and sort of shifting paths from doing biology-based lab science to now doing more theoretical modeling with computer programming.
Awesome. That's really cool. So you are a PhD candidate, or do you currently have
Yeah,
a PhD? Okay.
I'm a candidate. So I passed my qualifying exam, last summer now? Yeah.
Awesome. Congratulations. And then you worked at NASA for a couple years, and
Yes.
okay, and
Hmm.
now you're doing like research for
Yeah.
NASA.
Yes. So I'm a NASA, it's called the FINEST. It stands for Future Investigators and NASA Earth and Space Science Technology. So it's a proposal that I applied to and I got it. And so the rest of my PhD is funded by NASA.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I actually live near the Kennedy Space Center, so I'm in Florida right now. So I live near there, and I always love to go there and look at these shuttles, the old spacecraft from the moon landing, stuff like that. It's really awesome.
Yeah. Kennedy's one of the only centers I haven't been to, and it's great to see launches, which I've never actually done. So super
Yeah.
jealous of that.
Well, yeah, I actually see them sometimes in my backyard. I'll see like SpaceX launches and stuff. So it's really cool.
Yeah, so cool.
Um, awesome. So thanks for that. Hopefully the audience now knows more about you. They probably have seen you on TikTok as well. I've seen her do lives on TikTok. You guys should follow her there as well. So the first topic, because your main interest is astrobiology, so we're going to talk a lot about extraterrestrial life, aliens. But really, to understand more about aliens, we have to understand how they would develop and how they would evolve and where they would live in. So, in terms of exoplanets, what kind of planets could exist out there? Um, would they be more? What kind of planets are the most interesting out there that are outside of our star system? Can you name a few? Can you tell us a few interesting exoplanets or candidates for potential life?
Yeah. So I guess let me talk about just kind of interesting exoplanets as a whole, and then we'll break that down into
Right.
which ones could have life. Because I think unfortunately, there's way more exoplanets out there that aren't favorable to hold life, but they have so many interesting just qualities about them. So, for one, the most common type of planet out there is a planet that is bigger than Earth but smaller than Neptune. So, we call these either super Earths or mini Neptunes. And I think they're really interesting because they're the most common type of planet in the galaxy, but we don't have one in our solar system. So our solar system, it's what we know the best, but it isn't even an analog to what is most commonly found. And I think that that is something that really just totally shifted my mindset of how big the universe is when I found that out. Aside from that, there's a lot of other really interesting planet types that we see a lot of in the galaxy, but we don't see in our solar system. So one of these is hot Jupiters. So these are planets that are the size of Jupiter, but they orbit super close to their star. They usually have orbital periods of like 12 days or less, in comparison to Earth, which
Mm.
is 365 days. So you can imagine they're really, really hot. And those are really fascinating because just looking at the physics of it, a lot of people didn't think that these planets should exist. It doesn't really make sense that these massive planets are so close to their stars. So there's a lot of interesting different theories about, how these planets got to be where they are. And that's something that's still debated this day in science. Aside from that, what I like to tell people is basically if you can imagine it exists, then it probably does. So there's exoplanets all over the place that are there's planets where it rains molten iron. There's planets where it rains glass sideways. There's planets that orbit two stars instead of one. And so they have two sunsets every day and two sunrises. And just it's really fascinating how much is out there. But when we're thinking of exoplanets that could host life, we are looking for terrestrial worlds. So ones with rocky surfaces. So these would be like planets that are similar to Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are gas giants and ice giants, and we don't expect to find life on those worlds because the conditions are just not right. They don't have a surface to stand on. The pressure is incredibly high, and there's no liquid water on the surface. Like it just doesn't make sense. So when we're looking for planets that could be hospitable to life, we really look for those terrestrial worlds. The problem is they're really difficult to detect because of their size.
Right. And to give people like a broader perspective on this, there are uh, billions of stars in our galaxy, right? There's at least 400 billion. And there are at least 2 trillion galaxies out there, right? So we multiply 2 trillion by 400 billion on average. That's like 10 to the 24 stars in the universe that we can observe. Plus, doesn't every star typically have around 5 planets around them?
Oh, I don't know about five. I'm not sure what the multiplicity number constrained is. But they almost all have at least one, but more than one. Yeah.
Right.
Um,
So you can, on average, like maybe two or three.
yeah, maybe like two or three. Yeah. Well,
Right.
it's
So,
also it's hard to know for sure because we can't detect all of them yet. So
right.
it's like a lot of this is just statistics. Yeah.
Right. Right. But yeah. So if we could, like, our best guess would be just, the point is that there's so many stars and there's so many possible worlds out there. And there are so many different possible configurations of like chemical compounds on these planets
Yeah.
that could survive in under different parameters that can yield different types of life that we wouldn't even be able to recognize. So the point is that there's a bigger perspective out there that we don't understand. You talk about mini Neptunes, you talked about hot Jupiters, but I'm just wondering, why is it? Because I've noticed so far that our planetary system seems to be a bit unique in terms of our galaxy around us. Typically, most planets are around binary systems. Ours seems to be a bit unique. Um, what do you think that would be is it the case that we don't have a mini Neptune or hot Jupiter in our star system, but they're most common out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think a lot of it has to do with observation bias, but at the same time, it's basically the fact that different stars have different likelihoods of forming different systems. So, the sun is a G star. It's kind of in the medium size of stars that are out there, but a huge majority of the stars that we observe right now as planetary scientists are M dwarfs. These are the smallest stars in the galaxy, and they're the most common. And so I think that there's a lot of reasons why we can understand why the different types of planets exist around those types of stars. But I definitely wonder how things will change as we're able to observe more sun-like stars in the future. So sun-like stars are harder to observe the planets around them because they have much longer orbital periods. So it's really easy to observe planets that have, a 10-day orbital period or less, which we see a lot in a lot of these M dwarf stars. But the good news is that in the future of space-based telescope missions, we're planning on doing a lot more direct imaging missions that will allow us to observe a lot more of these sun-like stars and make better of an understanding of kind of why we have certain planets in some solar systems and why we don't. I also kind of think it's just a game of chance at this point, because I've seen so many different examples of different solar systems that it almost seems like there's no way to make sense of it.
Yeah. What percent of stars out there in our galaxy are M type? Are these like 70%?
70%, yes.
Okay. And in terms of our star, which is like you said a G star,
Hmm.
was that like 7%?
I think so. I think it's between 6 to 8%. I have to double check, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's really crazy. Like, I mean, well, we say that because we're here and we happen to be alive here, but
Yeah.
perhaps in other galaxies, there's another type of system that's more common, and that's where life is. Okay, that's really interesting. Now, on that same note, I mean, I want to talk about Planet X, which is something interesting to me because for a long time I never thought it was real. I thought it was just a conspiracy or nonsense. But now
Hmm.
it seems like there's more and more data that actually points to this planet in our own solar system that really is out there. Like, can you say about that?
So I study exoplanets, so I try to keep up with what's going on in our solar system, but I'm not always completely up to date. What I can say is that I think it's super fascinating, just like you. I think it would be just so awesome if we could prove that there was another planet in our solar system that we haven't known about for the entire existence of humanity.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't understand why it's so hard to find, and I think it's always important to remind people of those things. So we believe that if there is a planet X or planet 9, that the orbital period would be somewhere between 10,000 to 20,000 Earth years. And a lot of the ways that, yeah, and a lot of the ways that we, find exoplanets, you're never going to have a mission that's usually dedicated to looking for one specific object because the budget just doesn't allow for that. So it's going to just be really difficult to find. But I mean, I think it's definitely very possible. There's obviously something that's causing this peculiar gravitational movement in the outer edges of our solar system, and it definitely could be explained by the presence of, an extra planet this would actually probably be one of those super Earth or mini Neptune sized planets.
Hmm.
So yeah, it would be super cool.
So, what makes us what is making people think that this planet exists out there? Is it you said there's like an anomaly outside of us in the outer solar system?
So there's these objects that are called, I think it's ETNOs, extreme trans-Neptunian objects. So they're these just bodies of like clusters that are, out beyond Neptune, and they have these orbits, but their orbits seem to all be aligned with each other. Like all of these objects are making their orbit around the sun at the same time. So that could be explained by the fact that there's something larger out there in that same area that's controlling the orbits of all of these smaller objects.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense that there would be a planet there. And you're saying the planet could be the size of like it could be bigger than Earth
Yes.
or
The
massive.
thought is that it would be a super Earth or mini Neptune, which is that size of planet that we don't have, but that would make it even more interesting if it turns out that we did. and we just didn't know it.
Yeah, that is really creepy to think about that because like you said, if its orbital period is 10,000 years, that's like hundreds of times out like than our own planet. So
Yeah.
that's just so far away and so dark, like you just can't see it.
Yes, yes. It's much easier to detect a planet when it's bright and hot, so close to the star. And so this thing, could not be further from the star than it is. And so every detection method that you can think of, it just goes out the window.
Wow, that's really crazy. But I think it would be a really great discovery because it would just show people how like it would just give more reason to think that there's so much more mystery out there. Because something
Exactly.
that's in our own neighborhood that we have missed for ever since we had telescopes. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, cool. So, um, next question I want to talk about is the next topic I want to talk about is the origin of life and life in the universe. We only know of one. We only have our own, and we're made of basic carbon stuff, carbon molecules and amino acids and proteins. Um, but what kind of what do you have to say about origin of life outside of our own Earth? And if you have any expertise there, what kind of stuff could we find out there in terms of life?
Yeah. So basically, a lot of people usually come into this question kind of saying, well, isn't there a chance that whatever is out there could be so drastically different than from what we see on Earth that we're not looking for the right thing? We do have to start somewhere, and we do believe that the laws of physics state that everything should be the same within the whole entire universe. So we expect the laws of physics to work the same everywhere, not just in our solar system, but in our whole galaxy and the galaxies beyond it.
Right.
And it's also just you have to have a starting point because otherwise, what are you searching for if there's no, kind of a path that you cut out? So I traditionally, the way that most astrobiologists traditionally are kind of doing this right now is we are looking for, carbon-based life on other worlds outside of our own. The biggest thing that we start with and what we really agree is necessary is a planet with liquid water. We don't expect to find life without water. Life needs water in every way that we've looked at it, and it's just, the best place to start. That's a reason why we're going to look at Europa, which is one of the moons in our solar system, because it has a subsurface ocean, so there's a chance to find life there. So when we're looking for life on other worlds, we're looking for water, which we don't know of any exoplanets as of now that have liquid water on their surface. But we're also looking for elements that are required for life. These are often called CHNOPS, so carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. These are required for, cellular processes here on Earth, and we expected that, again, to be similar in other places, or at least just use that as a starting point. But we're definitely, a lot of people ask about intelligent life, and I think it's hard for me to feel like we'll be able to find intelligent life before we find even just bacterial life. Because a lot of people don't realize, we have not found life on another planet. We have not. A lot of people say, oh, I thought we, found life on Mars. No, we didn't. We haven't. That hasn't happened. And then the other thing that I really like to kind of talk about is the element of time, because I actually think that that has a huge factor in this that people really don't know about. So if you think about it, our Earth is around 4.5 billion years old, but humanity has only been around for about 200,000 of those years. And compared to 4.5 billion years, that's a blink of an eye in the lifetime of our planet. When a planet forms, it doesn't immediately become, you know, it doesn't immediately have the conditions to host life.
Hmm.
And eventually later on, this planet's not going to be hospitable to humans either. And humanity is going to disappear a lot longer before the Earth disappears. So it's not just about finding the right planet, but it's also about finding the right planet at the right time.
Mm.
And so I think timing is super important. We're also, when we look at objects, we're looking at them in the past because of the way the light travels. There's just so many different things to account for that makes it so hard. And hopefully one day it gets easier, but yeah.
Yeah, where people think that we're so much further ahead than we are in terms of like understanding the universe. We're not. We barely have. It's like an ocean. We're like taking a cup of water from the ocean. That's our sample size so far. Um, but I think you had a like the first thing you said. Yeah, I agree that I think that when we look for life, we have to start somewhere. And carbon and like you said, schnobs. That's a good place to start because and for a good reason, right? The reason is because these specific elements are very reactive elements. They're very they can make long chains, like chains of amino acids, things like that. So the reason why we look for these specific elements is because these are very reactive elements that are capable of producing complex chains that make us who we are.
Yeah.
Um, and but of course, there's perhaps different types of living possible nucleic acids out there. But have we found any like of these organic molecules out in other planets? Have we found these complex molecules yet on other moons or planets yet?
So we have started doing sample return missions for the first time in the last few years, and we're still waiting on Mars return samples, but we have, I think, Hayabusa 2 just came back with samples. This was a Japanese mission to, I believe, an asteroid, and it did show the presence of organic molecules in the composition of the asteroid. And this kind of reconfirms one of the hypotheses that all of these organic molecules were delivered to Earth through an asteroid or a comet. A lot of astrobiologists believe that comets are what brought water to our planetary surface. So it's actually really incredible to be able to prove that that's a possibility. And I think that I am super excited for sample return missions in the future. That is the one unfortunate, well, there's many unfortunate things about being an exoplanet scientist, but one of the biggest ones is that we'll never have the ability to do that kind of sample return stuff that you can do in the solar system. And it would just be incredible to be able to work on that stuff. I really think it's fascinating.
Yeah, me too. So, and every time we find these organic molecules out there, I think Cassini also discovered organic
Yeah,
molecules on Enceladus, and the more we find these things out there, these molecules, the more the better off we are in terms of probability that there's life out there beyond the Earth, because it tells us how common these things are.
right.
And like you said, these things form in space. Like um, water is a very common. People think water is very rare. It's actually very common in the universe, right? It's a common thing that happens all the time. In fact, almost every single planet in our solar system has water in some form.
Yeah, just not the liquid form we want, but yeah, it is good to note, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think Enceladus is like an ocean of water under its.
Yeah, yeah, I'm thinking planets though.
So,
Enceladus is a moon, but still important. There's
oh yeah,
the plumes that come out that yes, the flyby mission was doing the detection. Yeah, Enceladus and Europa are super fascinating targets because of their water content.
right. And so the point is that yeah, when we find these molecules out there, it's going to tell us how common life is, and I think that's why a lot of scientists are hopeful that life is out there. And the point is, it's going to be very similar to us in terms of basic composition. It's not going to be too wildly different from us for the most part, because these molecules seem to be very common out there. But of course, there'll be different kinds of variations probably. Um, but if you had to guess, I mean, what would you think? Um, do you think that microbial life is the most common type of life?
Probably just because it's easiest to form,
Right.
requires the least amount of energy, I would have to guess. Yeah.
And isn't it the case that these molecules form like in the like when a planetary system begins, isn't there or, like in the nebula cloud, isn't there like a chemical process that goes on that produces these organic molecules?
Yeah. So it's the protoplanetary disk. And so all of
Mm.
these elements are, that's kind of where the quote, like, we're all made of stardust comes from, because every element that you see in these stars, you see in our planet, and you also see some of them in our bodies. So it's
Right.
really cool. Yeah.
Right. But in these compounds, like I mean, I'm talking about these organic compounds, like amino acids, don't they
Oh, yeah.
form in these like planetary disks?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Um, I also want to talk about the clouds of Venus. There's a recent article that came out that scientists are thinking that it's more plausible that life is actually inside the clouds of Venus. What do you think about that?
So I am pretty adamant that that article is a farce. um, Myself and my colleagues are all in agreeal on that. I don't work with anyone that does believe it's possible. There's been a lot of work actually done by my team and the teams that I work on to kind of prove why it's not possible.
Mm.
This phosphine detection is not, it doesn't point to life. It's not a strong detection. It can be ruled out by a lot of other things. And I feel like the authors of that research just took it and ran with it. And I have suspicions on why that is. But unfortunately, this happens a lot. This happened recently with something else that's kind of related, where people took and ran with it. The idea that someone was saying on TikTok that the James Webb Space Telescope found city lights on an exoplanet, and that never happened, and that wasn't true. And all of the sources cited were just had nothing to do with NASA. It was all like personal opinion stuff. And so it's just, it's so frustrating, because as much as I would love to sit here and talk about how excited I am that there could possibly be life on Venus, unfortunately it like ruins the reputation of astrobiologists when this kind of stuff happens, because that's not what's happening.
Yeah. Can you elaborate more, like, at the process? Because, from what I recall, the phosphine is a particular I think it's an amino acid or some kind of particular organic compound that is produced that is important for life. Um, and we seem to be detecting it in the atmosphere of Venus, which we know on the surface of Venus is way too much pressure for anything like us to survive. But up in the clouds, there's a specific range where the temperatures are good and pressures are good, where you can get something like us or some kind of living molecule. So, can you elaborate as to why that couldn't be the case, or probably is not the case?
it's it's the fact that the detection itself is not a true detection. It's very, so I can't remember which molecule it is or which ones specifically overlap with the region on the spectrum that they were pointing as being phosphine. But it's very obvious when you just look at it with, a second eye, that first of all, that's the other thing. Their error bars are massive. Like,
Mm.
their error bars are huge, but people in the media don't know how to read error bars, and that's totally understandable. And that's why you have to come across with your statements as, if you go back to their original paper, they never claimed to have found life. But
Right.
again, like, people take it and run with it. But yes, it's the detection itself that I and many others believe is not legitimate. And there have been follow-up observations done by other teams with other instruments, and they have confirmed that they're not getting the same results.
So you're saying, like, when we look when we detect certain elements or certain things with spectrometry, right? What is it called?
Spectrometry. I can't even, hold on. Spectrometry.
Spectrometry, right. We look for certain, like when we shine light through it, and when what we get back is typically what that specific compound reflects or radiates. Um, so what you're
Absorb
saying is that, or absorbs. So
or
what you're
reflect.
yeah.
Sorry.
So what you're saying is that that band is too wide because it overlaps with other things, with other possible organic or possible compounds. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
it's not that it's too wide. It's just so there's multiple. You can use a band like that to say, hey, I think this is what we're seeing here. But when it overlaps with so many other elements, what you need to do is do multi wavelength band detection, because all of these
Mm.
elements, they don't just absorb in one specific wavelength. It's like water. You have, like, if you're doing a micron, you have a feature at 1.13, you have another feature at 1.3, you have another feature at 1.7. So the best way to quantify your detection is by saying we have absorption here and we also have absorption in all these other parts of the spectrum where we know this thing absorbs. And they did not have that. They
Right.
were saying, look at this feature, this has to be it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why that's difficult to do is because each telescope instrument operates in a different wavelength range. It's impossible to have an instrument that goes from 0 to 20 where you can say, okay, we have all of these, elements absorbing in all these places. It's a very limited wavelength range. So what other people have done is gotten other instruments that are operating in other parts of the spectrum and saying, we're not seeing phosphine.
Right. Okay. Wow. That you're kind of
Yeah.
making me feel bad now because
No.
I wish it was life.
That's what I mean. Like it's a crappy feeling because I wish that I could sit here and get excited about that too, but I
Right.
can't, and it sucks because this keeps happening.
How about Mars? I mean, the closest planet, well, second closest planet. Um, do you know anything about Mars? Does it have like water? Does it have water potential? Water running on the surface in terms of like brine water,
No,
salty water?
it has Mars has frozen ice caps at the poles, but there are ancient lakes that I believe we have proven were definitely lakes at one point, but those lakes are now all dried up. And that's where a lot of the rovers and missions are going to search for evidence of previous life. So Mars isn't thought by astrobiologists to have any present or future life, but there is still the possibility that there once was life on Mars, and that's still something that people are trying to fully understand.
Yeah, and wasn't it the case that Mars, if it had water on the surface, it would be enough to like cover the entire planet in like 30 feet of water or something? And is that the case?
I'm not positive, but probably it is smaller than Earth. I think the biggest problem with Mars is that it has 1% the atmosphere that Earth
Hmm.
has, or less than 1%. So not having an atmosphere is an issue for
Yeah,
holding it
there's
down.
probably no life there now, but
Yeah.
saying what I'm trying to get to is like if there was enough water on the surface for enough time in the past,
Yeah.
perhaps there was life in the past
Yeah.
there. And like you said, there's like ancient lake beds and all these really amazing geological features on Mars.
Yeah.
But if it had life, it died and it was a quick run for them, right?
Yeah.
Like on
Yeah.
Earth, we have magnetic field, we have atmosphere that stays there, so we have more protection against radiation. So,
Hmm.
but it's really interesting to see, perhaps Mars had life in the past, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That would be a really cool discovery.
Yeah. I can't wait for the Artemis missions next year. Well, actually this year. Well, they're probably going to delay it.
I think they're delayed. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to delay it.
But yes, I'm also excited.
I want to go back to the moon so we can debunk all these moon mythers, people that think we didn't go to the moon.
I know that's something that's so frustrating for me. That's all of my comments on live now are about that, about it's either the moon landing was fake or what about the firmament? And it's so funny comparing. my experience on TikTok now to the experience I was having like 2 years ago, that was not at all
Right.
that word never came up. And I'm like, what happened on the internet in the last 2 years? What I just it's crazy.
Yeah, that's why I'm taking a break from TikTok because it's just way too toxic. And um, I feel like people don't go online with a scientific mindset. They just look at there's so much information online. So you can be bombarded by information. If you don't have a scientific attitude towards what's true or what's not true, if you don't know how to falsify anything you're looking at, you're going to be lost.
Yeah.
And this is why people take these ridiculous ideas and then they think they're true because they don't from the get-go they're not understanding how to falsify something. They don't understand what sources are good from which sources are not good. So when you don't have a scientific mindset, this is why I do this. Like this is why I'm here because I think science is important for this
Yeah.
reason.
Me too.
Um, yeah, what do you say? What do you have to say about that?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's really heartbreaking. I think it's really easy to blame it on like present day education. And I mean, I think that students today were really just had the unlucky thing handed to them going through COVID. I was in grad school when that happened, and I just can't imagine having been in middle school or high school. I mean, people really lost a lot of formative years, and the way that learning is taught is not as much problem solving as it should be. It's a lot of like regurgitation and memorization and things
Right.
that don't test your ability to actually survive in a world where constant misinformation is being thrown at you. I say that, but at the same time, it's affecting a lot of the older generation just as badly. They are incapable of, knowing what the difference between a conspiracy and a reality is on the internet, and they're having horrible things happen to them. So many people's grandparents are getting scammed because,
Mm.
just things like that. And so it's like I can't even blame any generation or anything specific. It's just that something needs to be done and I don't know what it needs to be, but it's like I wish that when you signed up for social media like a TikTok or YouTube or something that there was like a mandated video or something that played to you that is like the content that is on this app is not, approved. Anyone can say anything they want. There's no requirement to be honest when you're on the internet. So I just think that that's like a lesson that I wish that more people would learn.
Yeah, and like you said, when you go to school, in terms of public schools, they just kind of regurgitate stuff to you, and the student in that process doesn't really think. They don't really learn. They're not really learning critically. What they're doing is they're just being told stuff, and if that keeps happening, they kind of just start distrusting the teacher because it's like, who cares? You're just telling me fact. You're just telling me stuff. They don't know what to do with that information.
Yeah.
And that's why you take those students and bring them to the social media world where they're just being told information. They don't know what to do with it. They just go whatever feels good, right? And that's the point is that the human brain wants to look at things that feel good to them and what
Mhm.
makes sense to them. But in the science world, that's the opposite. Typically, what is true doesn't make sense typically, or is counterintuitive. So I think that the solution is to just ingrain this scientific mindset into people from the get-go. Ask them questions, ask them good questions, make them think on their own, make them problem solve, like you said. But yeah, it's just unfortunate the situation we're in.
Yeah.
Um, COVID definitely didn't help and just exacerbated the problem. Teachers are quitting at record rates. You
They
know,
don't get paid enough. It's horrible.
yeah, it's sad. Teachers are It's like a double whammy because teachers don't get paid enough, and then the students who are just so distracted on social media all they want is their phones. Like they're just used to it, and all they want to do is talk. And
Their
then
attention spans are much lower. I mean, mine is too now. Like I am not at all above
right,
what has happened to society. I am
yeah,
really just grateful that I grew up a bit before it went in that direction.
yeah. Social media really these past 4 or 5 years have absolutely just destroyed lots of like the integrity that people have
Yeah.
because it's just so toxic. Like it allows people to just say what they want whenever they want, and they don't care about hurting other people's feelings. They don't care about being wrong. They don't care about anything. I don't know. I
Yeah.
wish
I
we
mean,
can go back in
that's
time and warn people. Like, don't.
can we restart the origin of life? Can we maybe we'll do it right on another planet. I don't know. Maybe there's another civilization somewhere else that has it all figured out and they don't even have social media over there.
But yeah, that's why I think people like you who are science communicators, thank you. Um, because I think that's another part of the solution, getting people excited about science again. Because
Yeah.
people go to school, they're just being told stuff. They don't get excited by that. Like
Yeah.
part of what makes science exciting is what you can do with it, the potential,
Mhm.
the toolbox you're given. Science is a tool. It's like a
Yeah.
toolbox, and people don't understand that. People just think science is just regurgitating stuff or memorizing stuff on a test. That's not
Yeah.
science.
I think also another thing that we don't emphasize enough for the students is the amount of unknown that is inherently in science. We learn things like we learn everything we know in school, but I wish that someone had told me in school, like the first exoplanet wasn't discovered until the 90s. And this is a brand new field that is doing science for the first time. Like, here are some, like, let's just, you could easily name tons of different career paths and get your students to understand that there's so many different fields in STEM that are brand new. I mean, all the stuff that you can do with AI in a positive way to cure medical conditions. You can also use it to look for exoplanets. Like, I feel like curriculum needs to emphasize the unknown, because otherwise, what's the point of being a scientist if you're learning that everything's already been figured out, you know? I think it's like that's what I really try to tell people is like we don't know anything and there's
Yeah,
so much to learn.
that's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. People think that everything's known already. No, absolutely not. Like, there's so much out there to learn. And like you said, I think that AI will actually be also part of the solution of getting people back on track because there's a lot of kids out there but it's hard for teachers to really personalize lessons to students. Whereas AI with ChatGPT 4 and beyond, it actually has the ability to actually personalize a lesson. And
Yeah.
we're seeing this with, I think Google's AI or Microsoft's AI, where it can actually teach students like new languages and new things. Hopefully soon that will be used for science. People can
Yeah.
be like given personalized lessons, and I think that will be really helpful for education. It will change it.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah. In and what do you think about AI and all that stuff? Do you think that it's going to drastically change the world, or in the near future?
I think that I think that positive will come from it and negative will come from it. I don't think we can ever replace the human side of
Mm,
things, and I hope that that remains. But I do think it's a wonderful first glance at something new. We can really use it to so much of planetary science is data processing and working with massive amounts of data that it's just so time consuming to get through. And so when you can run a bunch of data through AI and teach it, hey, tell me if there's an exoplanet in here, and you can kind of get that first pass in a matter of minutes rather than hours or days, super helpful. Is it going to cut out people completely? Again, I hope not, but I've seen some really good benefits come from it. I have seen benefits myself in my everyday. I use ChatGPT to help me figure out my coding bugs all the time. And the first time I put it off for so long, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't think it'll be that great. I don't know if it's worth it. Someone was like, no, just try it. For the question you just asked me, just try it. So I did it. And my jaw just dropped because I was like, oh my God, it understood exactly what I was asking and it gave me the answer. And it also lets you copy code cells directly out of, the website. Like my jaw dropped and I still, every time I use it, I'm like, there's no way this is going to work. And then it works and I'm still shocked and like excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, AI, probably gonna outcode us soon, like,
Yeah.
to be honest. Um, and how about, like, I know that a few years ago, AI helped solve, like, a puzzle from, like, these protein foldings or whatever. I wonder if AI will help us in space in astrobiology. I wonder if AI will help us in science. What do you think?
I think it's totally possible. I don't think we know everything it can do yet. But from what I've seen so far, absolutely. I definitely think it'll continue to be incorporated. I'm sure it could be used on the International Space Station, you know, uh, in ways that I can't even wrap my head around right now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, imagine like typing something into AI and be like, "Hey, make a space telescope better than the James Webb," and it's just like, "Here you go. Here's how you build it." Like
Then I
that.
won't have a job anymore.
Hey, find me an exoplanet that has life on it. Goes
Yeah,
finds it. That would be a game changer.
yes,
So
it would.
yeah, so as pessimistic as I am on human people, students, I am optimistic about AI. I am optimistic about it. I think that it's going to be our saving grace because we've become so lazy as people in these past few years online that AI is going to kind of like kick us in the butt and say, "Hey, I can do this better than you." And when people start losing their jobs and start, it's going to be interesting.
That's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Um, so we got about 12 minutes left. Tell us a bit about your research right now and what's what's exciting, and tell us anything you want.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'm always working on more than one project at a time. But my main project is the research that I'm funded on through NASA to finish my PhD. So it's my thesis project. And the title of that work is High CO2 Climates in the Outer Habitable Zone. So the habitable zone, of course, is a zone where it's a distance that's not too close to the star, not too far from the star, so not too cold, not too hot, but this kind of just right distance from a star that a planet can lie in order to have liquid water on its surface. So, for example, Earth is in the habitable zone of our solar system, but the habitable zone has sections. It has an inner half and an outer half, and Mars is actually on the outer edge of our habitable zone in our solar system. So in the past, we've done a lot of photochemical and climate modeling of planets on the inner habitable zone, where we think that it will have really low levels of CO2 due to the carbonate silicate cycle. But we really haven't done much extensive work on the outer habitable zone. That's where CO2 concentrations would be much higher. And I am using not only 1D photochemical models, but also three-dimensional climate models to study what planets in the outer habitable zone would look like, where they would have to exist to have habitable conditions, what their atmospheres might look like from a telescope, and also using all of that data to inform future telescope missions that will be searching specifically for Earth-like planets. So, three-dimensional climate modeling is relatively new to exoplanet science. It started out with Earth climate modeling in 3D, and now in the last few years, exoplanet scientists have taken Earth climate models and kind of translated them to work for exoplanets. So that's what I work on doing. And oh, my light died. I really enjoy it. So yeah, I do a lot of coding, a lot of modeling. It's a lot of theoretical stuff that I hope to tie in with actual telescope data when we launch the next generation of telescopes in like the 2040s.
Interesting. Wait, so you said that CO2 is higher in the outer habitable zone. Is that because of the, like you said, the silicate carbon
Carbon
cycle?
silicate cycle, yeah.
Why would it be higher in the outer but not the inner?
I'm gonna have to look at my slide for this to explain it correctly to you.
Is it just because is there less heat causing the cycle to occur, and that's why there's more
Yes,
CO2?
it's a
Okay.
relationship with temperature.
Okay.
So it's kind of weird because people think like, why do you think that? It's not a means to search for intelligent life. It's a means to search for microbial life that could exist.
Right.
Because we don't think that like humans couldn't survive with that high of CO2 concentrations, but a lot of other things could.
Gotcha. And maybe that's why we see Mars with like such CO2 concentration, maybe, right? Because isn't
Yeah.
like 95% of it is CO2?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't think about that before. Okay. Yeah, cool. Then you plug that information into telescopes, and you can be better at searching for living habitable planets. That's
Well, yeah, you get like we're trying to bring it down to specific values, like insolation values, so specific distances that planets would have to be habitable. So we know, like, if we find a planet and we know the distance from a star, like we can take a guess on whether there's even a chance that life could be there.
right. But and the last thing I'll talk about is like um, intelligent life out there. I mean, I think it's something that is an entirely different category because, like you said, with the element of time, the universe is so vast and so old that perhaps there's species out there that have developed that are just so overwhelmingly more intelligent than we are that we couldn't even understand them, even if they were right in front of our faces, right? Like it's like an ant talking to a person.
Right.
Like, it's not, even if an ant is walking on my smartphone, like it wouldn't know what it is. So I feel like we're like the ant. And if there's intelligent life out there, we're probably not going to, they're probably observing us already and we don't even know it.
Yes, that's super possible. Or I think that if they had the ability to do that, that they would have taken over by now.
Yeah, but like, what are they going to take over? I mean, what do they want from us? We're just one little rock. I mean, I feel like there'd be
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry about this. I'll just leave it off. Yeah, I think I just don't see what like you're saying what would they want from us, but like what's the benefit of just sitting and observing? Because that's using energy to do that too. You know what I mean? So I feel like if they're using their energy to like observe us, then they might as well take that energy and just wipe us off the planet completely.
yeah, it'd kind of be like us observing like microbes like on a petri dish or something, right? Like
Yeah.
we're not gonna go into the petri dish and go, "Hey guys, welcome. I give you an iPhone. I give you rewards." No, I don't know. I think that they might have a way of observing us that is just so far beyond our even understanding that they're already doing it.
Yeah.
The
Definitely
the
not
point
writing that off.
the point is that the possibilities are just endless.
Yes.
And one of the first things you said, uh, or I think is totally true, that the universe is full of possibilities and there's it could go on forever. And it's really mind-boggling to think about and ponder about.
Yeah.
So, anything else you wanted to add before we go?
Nothing I can think of. Always trying to make new content on TikTok when I can. So that's probably the most common platform to find any of my science content on if you're interested. But aside from that, no, thank you so much for having me. This was super fun. It's always fun to talk about this stuff. And, if there's ever other science events in the future or things that happen, I'd be happy to chat with you about those again.
Yeah, you should invite me over to NASA sometime.
Yes, will do. Where are you living now?
Orlando.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, in Florida. Got it.
Yeah, so I'm right next to Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, cool.
Um,
Yeah.
your handle is at Daria
I think it's at planet.daria. My
on TikTok.
Twitter, yes, my Twitter handle is, I think my TikTok handle could have changed a while ago, but yes, it's at planet.daria. Same as my Instagram,
Gotcha.
Twitter, Astrodaria.
Okay. Yeah, guys, everybody go check her out. Go follow her. Go check out her videos and her live. She does it all the time. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate you
you.
talking with me.
Yeah.
And good luck in your future, in your studies.
Thank you. Thanks, you too.
Bye, guys. See you next time.